problem of ADD, ADHD, misdiagnosis. Number 2. Gifted or ADHD. Last week, we started our look at the huge problem of ADD, ADHD, misdiagnosis. The true extent of this problem becomes apparent when you stop to analyze the diagnosis rates over the past decade, and also the rate at which ADD, ADHD medication is prescribed. The result of such an analysis will astound you. When plotted on a graph, it appears as if the ADD, ADHD industry can look forward to being one of the few growth industries left in the wider economy. So what is happening? It seems that we are either facing an epidemic of catastrophic proportions or a diagnostic system that is driven by something else besides clinical accuracy. It is my conviction that the latter is the case, and that vast numbers of people receive incorrect ADD, ADHD diagnoses with life-changing implications every year. I want to repeat that I believe that the reasons behind these wrong diagnoses are failure to investigate alternative explanations. An ADD, ADHD diagnosis has become almost fashionable in some circles and is therefore the first thing some medical professionals reach out for when confronted with behavioral problems. Outside pressure. Some teachers and caregivers see an ADD, ADHD diagnosis and the resultant prescription of mind-altering chemicals as the quickest way out of their difficulties in dealing with a particular student. This results in pressure on parents to have a child tested, usually by a professional who can be relied upon to make the desired diagnosis. Money. The manufacturers of ADD, ADHD medication have access to multi-million-dollar marketing budgets that serve to keep the possibility of an ADD, ADHD diagnosis warm in the mind of medical professionals, teachers, and parents. This week's article will focus on a cause of misdiagnosis that could very easily be filed under the first alternative. Failure to investigate alternative explanations. It is a well-established fact that many children who have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD were actually gifted students who acted out in response to being bored with the educational environments in which they have been placed. It is easy to understand why the educators and professionals sometimes confuse the effects of ADD, ADHD with the classic responses of gifted students to unchallenging environments. Children exhibiting the effects of ADD, ADHD and unrecognized gifted children often display remarkably similar behaviors, including increased activity levels, difficulty paying attention, impulsivity, lack of focus and persistence, and difficulty following rules. If you use only these behaviors as the methods for diagnosing ADD, ADHD, it will be very easy for a gifted student to be misdiagnosed. The fact is, however, that similar behavioral patterns do not necessarily stem from the same causes. Classic ADD, ADHD symptoms can be traced back to problems with brain function, e.g. malfunctioning neurotransmitters. ADD, ADHD type symptoms exhibited by gifted children have radically different explanations. This is why it is so vitally important that an ADD, ADHD diagnosis should never be made simply on the basis of behavioral analysis. Research has shown that gifted children generally possess advanced abilities in at least some of the following areas: psychomotor, sensual, intellectual, imaginational, and emotional. Of particular interest to this discussion are the areas of advanced psychomotor and imaginational abilities. The first is characterized by behaviors such as rapid speech and impulsive bodily movement. The latter by intensive visualization and daydreaming. It would take an uninformed professional just a short step to move from these behaviors to diagnosing hyperactivity and inattentiveness, respectively. Another reason for the confusion that sometimes exists between ADD, ADHD, and giftedness has to do with the response of gifted students to their educational environments. Some educationalists estimate that gifted students often spend half of the school day waiting for their peers to catch up. This can obviously lead to intense boredom and difficulty focusing on previously acquired skills. Gifted students often respond to such understimulating educational environments by acting out or by transferring their attention elsewhere. The last reason for the confusion has to do with the fact that gifted students often develop social problems not unlike those experienced by people dealing with the symptoms of ADD, ADHD. The main reason behind this is the fact that they are often more intellectually and emotionally developed than their peers, making it difficult for them to fully relate and fit in. It should be clear from the above that you could very easily end up with a similar set of behaviors, but with radically different causes, and also radically different ways of dealing with it. The 3 steps outlined on this website and a clear gifted child program respectively, although following the 3 steps in the case of a gifted child certainly wouldn't hurt either. If you suspect that you are being pressured into accepting an ADD, ADHD diagnosis in the case of a child who might be gifted, you should take immediate action by reversing the normal order of things. The normal state of affairs is that it is found out that a child is actually gifted long after an ADD, ADHD diagnosis was made. I would strongly advise you have your child's abilities assessed as a first step. A sympathetic educational psychologist could help you with this before you even consider taking him or her into a system that is likely to simply produce an ADD, ADHD diagnosis. Doing so could save you a lot of hassle and heartache over the long run. Please check back next week for some more common reasons behind ADD, ADHD misdiagnosis. See you then.